Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where everything revolves around £50,000. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Sky Fantasy Football, James. What are we talking about today?
I'm getting really excited for the start of this, way more than the other game. Um, we've done a lot of focus on the need, so I wanted to do a little bit on dealing with the want, because one of the themes, particularly for the new players, we'll cover off during the course of the season is understanding the big important difference between I need something and I want something. We're also going to have a look at enablers almost exclusively in the midfield area and see if we can identify ones that should be of interest to you. I know there's a school of thought at the moment, Suj, that an enabler for teams might not be necessary, particularly if it becomes clear that, say, Levi Colwell's perhaps going to start for Chelsea, which is looking more and more likely, by the way, at 7.5. Once you throw that in with like a Lewis Dunk at 8.3, it becomes a little bit easier not to have to go down the route of, who's the best 6 point whatever midfielder, for example. But of course, if you still go down that route and get the right one, that still enables you more money to play with in terms of the upper levels of the top players. So we've done what we need, Suj.
Correct.
What do you want?
Well, so I mean, obviously, I was away for about the best part of 10 days. We haven't spoken about Sky at all since the last Sky Fantasy podcast, other than knowing what the kind of stuff we wanted to talk about on this was. I listened to your show with Luke last week.
Great,
and
wasn't
thank you
it? It
again
always
to
is,
Luke
mate.
for coming in and stepping in and filling my shoes. And while sitting on a sun lounger, James, I made a draft.
Oh, that's exciting.
Then, obviously, this morning you've prepared, I should say, a watch list, the kind of players you want, and then also the enablers. I looked through the watch list and I looked at my draft. And from your watch list, James, which I should say, it's not huge. You got like 4 or 5 goalkeepers, 7, 8 defenders,
I mean, there's
a
like
lot of midfielders.
there's 35 players and half of them are in
Right.
the midfield area.
Okay, exactly that. How many of my 11 do you think, James, are in your list of 35?
10.
9.
I'm
9.
interested. Who are the two that
Well,
are not
exactly
on my
that. And the
list?
two that are in my team right now that are not on your watch list, I would say are the least like kind of they're my 10th and 11th players as it stands right now.
Okay,
Like I'm happy for them to be
to
someone else
go.
based on obviously with West Ham single game day and that kind of thing. So the two are Karim Mitoma, 8 million midfielder, could easily be Ben Rama if I need a captaincy because I haven't got Fabianski, and Gabriel Jesus at 10 million. He's
Okay.
in there over Martinelli because I couldn't afford Martinelli at 10.1. I think Martinelli's 10.1 from memory. So I put him in as a placeholder, 10.2. I didn't have enough money,
I mean,
but a
he's
little jiggery pokery, and I'm there. But other than that, Allison, Trent, Dunk, Saliba, Colwell, Gibbs White, Fernandez, Rashford, Haaland are the other 9. And then I've got Mitoma and Jesus. Like Mitoma and Jesus could be a combination
I
of.
mean, Mitoma and Jesus not bad picks, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, of
Remember, I've
course.
created a watch list that's for me, not
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah. And
Um,
eventually you got to pick some players that will try and give you an edge that you think will do well that other people maybe don't, right? It's zag when everyone's zigging or whatever it may be. So I'm not surprised that nine out of my 11 that are in this draft, which is only a 50% draft, I would say, like a thought process, are on that watch list because it is a very narrow pool of players that maybe we're picking from.
Mitoma, for me, is that nicks a midfield spot, and I know that Lewis Dunk is going in if he's fit. Now, if Lewis Dunk got injured, I would maybe reassess that and go, well, I definitely do want some Brighton coverage maybe at the start, although that's a want.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a need. There's no need to have a Brighton player. You certainly make a case that in terms of defensive shield, you may need Lewis Dunk because his ownership's going to be big and he's going to be very popular. You do
But
not
Brighton have good
need.
fixtures at the start, right?
Well,
So
exactly,
this
yeah.
is looking at the upside of will Matoma do well? I mean, Matoma's ownership, James, is over
Of
11%.
course.
So
And
it's
to be
not
honest, the price
low.
is reasonable. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
like he's overpriced, not at all.
Mm.
And on Jesus, that's actually it's similar to the FPL theory that a lot of people are going with him at the moment, in the sense that you can drop it down to anyone. My take on that with Jesus specifically for this format of game is I'm highly likely, I think, to start with an Arsenal defensive player. And
Yeah. 100%.
That's it. That's all it comes down to. I mean, to be honest, on my watch list for defenders at the moment, I've only got 8 names. And one of them is dodgy, i.e., basically, if exactly what happened, Dunk was injured, maybe Van Heck at 6.7 would maybe appeal. But yeah, defensive and forwards, I've only got 5 on the watch list. Keepers, there's only 5 currently. It's basically exactly what we discussed with Luke last week. A lot of the difficulty is coming towards making the right decisions for the midfield. And we had a really good discussion last week about, sort of like Foden's versus Rodri's. Do you go for that attacking up or do you go for the consistency? Now, over the course of the season, the consistency of a Rodri will probably win out with Foden and rotation. But if Foden did play 30 plus games this year, then there's every chance he pushed past him. I think so. It's not cut and dry, in my opinion.
In terms of who do I want, like what am I missing from my that draft that I just mentioned that I look at and is frustrating me? There are a couple of real standouts. One being Rodri, and with Rodri, I'll also put in brackets second Man City player. I've only got Haaland, and I would like a defensive or a second Man City player just as coverage in case I wanted to captain them on any given day. And my preference is Rodri. I think that's very heavily biased with how good he was for me last season. But 9.4 is fine. It's a decent price. And I think he'll do well. So missing the second Man City player, and particularly Rodri's on my want list. I would rather have any of Saka, Martinelli or Odegaard over Jesus, but I didn't have the money, so I couldn't put him in.
And so the position in midfield probably as well.
Yeah. So the Arsenal midfielder is also definitely on my want list. I think Jesus isn't too bad a downgrade if that's the sacrifice that needs to be made. I've got Trent and Alisson in there as double Liverpool defence, and Trent is the one that I'm more likely to have a captain over Alisson. But I am wary that I don't have the powerhouse of Salah and Kane. So if I don't know what you consider a premium in Sky, because the price that there's so much more bunched together, the price brackets, but I don't have a Salah or Kane either in this as a secondary backup. But
you won't be the only one going without those two.
No, but because we're so much more comfortable captaining a Lewis Dunk or someone like that, depending on what the fixtures are because of the tier points. So there are a few wants that I'm missing. The thing that comforts me most about not having them is always I'm not going to captain Rodri, so be it. And I've got a captaincy coverage for so on, so be it. So yeah, they're wants, but they're not really that bad or that big.
On Kane, my personal opinion right now is you can't go there at this minute because it's beginning to look more and more likely. And as we know from the Declan Rice deal, if an agreement comes into play, it's probably not going to be 24 hours later he signed for Bayern Munich. He's probably going to drag.
It'll take some time. Yeah, there's paperwork and stuff to get sorted. Yeah,
I just think it's one of them that, I mean, I didn't think we'd get to this situation, but I don't think it's improbable now that Kane might start the season with Tottenham and still go.
Yep.
I think that's becoming a possibility. So from that perspective, with the first two being Brentford away and Manchester United, I just don't think you'd need to start there or go there. So for me at the moment, the Salah versus Kane debate would really be leaning right into Mo Salah. But as you know, as heavily discussed with Luke last week, there's alternatives. If we get a clearer idea of alternative offensive players that will start, and obviously Trent at the back, Alisson in goal, there are alternatives with Liverpool that can cover off the captaincy as and when you want it. Again, you'd make the case there isn't a need to have a Liverpool player from captaincy in that first weekend. And there isn't for the weeks afterwards. You've still got Haaland against Salah's Bournemouth, for example, on the second Saturday. And then probably September the 3rd, which is a nice entry point. You can come back to it. And that's a key thing to remember, I think, with a Trent. Trent is want rather than need. It's want. I don't need Trent. Genuinely, get by. Even on that first Sunday, I captain like an Enzo Fernandez, or if I think Colwell's going to start, or if I've gone for a Son, or even like a Basuma, I don't need Trent. I want Trent. I want Mo Salah. There's a lot of players we'll all want. And you can come back for the likes of Mo Salah or Trent on that Sunday, the 3rd of September, particularly if you think now, well, yeah, we'll just captain Haaland against Newcastle on that second Saturday, and you're happy to have an alternative on the first Sunday. There's no need. It's exactly what we said. Liverpool and Tottenham don't fall into the need requirements right now. They fall into a want. And Tottenham's messy at the moment in terms of going in on, say, Kane, or we haven't seen Son in pre-season at time recording. He presumably is going to play in the friendly today at lunchtime.
The only single game day, James, that I haven't covered off is West Ham Luton, which we've got a bit, there's kind of 3 match weeks until. Neither have a particularly good entry point to go into before. If you look at the two teams, Luton's 2 games after the West Ham game, which is the Friday night, isn't it? Are better, or 3 games really. They got Fulham, Wolves, and then Everton, whereas West Ham straight after Luton walk into Man City, Liverpool. So I'm like, kind of, if I'm going to buy that player and keep him for a couple more fixtures, I'd rather buy the Luton player. And I think I don't have enough information of. So I'm kind of, I know that what I might do with that is use it as my reactionary transfer. Like, I think it's impossible to get to that point with no injuries or issues or problems. Yeah. So I might just leave it, and that will be my first transfer. The only issue is, like I said, there's no good entry point. So I might have to go in on the day.
Do you think Ben Roma's the best West Ham choice?
Yeah, I heard you and Luke talking about it last week, and obviously he said the keeper and Ben Rama were his. Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. You said Suj will probably think Ben Rama is the best West Ham choice. Yes, I do. I do. Obviously, ins and outs in terms of the transfer market will dictate that, because I also think Skamaka will be an interesting one. He's been getting minutes in pre-season, and the whole murmurings about him leaving and maybe moving on are a little quieter. I'd be interested to see if he.
There's been some Antonio out rumours as well.
Saudi, isn't there? So, I'd be interested to see. But as it stands, Ben Rama's the best value. You can justify the money for Bowen over Ben Rama. Plus pens on Ben Rama.
Do you think Flappy will start in goal?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. For you.
Well, he's playing all these preseason games. I know Ariella came back a little later.
Bloody great in the friendly against us last week.
Well, I was on that Sun Lounger, James, and didn't watch it. And I don't think anybody that paid the £5 on our website or the £40 million for Spurs TV or whatever watched it either, because all I could see on Twitter was updates from West Ham and then updates from everybody else saying this stream is shit. Why doesn't it work? So I don't know who did get to watch that, but yeah.
Well, I watched all of it, mate, with some difficulties, namely Korean, Spanish, and several alternative language commentaries, and with a big delay. To be honest, I had to watch the first half in silence. Okay. That was all. But they fixed it at halftime. I mean, Flappy was great against
starting the games, right? And he's not doing anything that justifies dropping him as it stands at the moment.
But then Flappy at 6.8 is very reasonable to start with in that case.
Yeah. But this game we are more comfortable goalkeeper transfers than we are in FPL. But I don't see that as where I would want to use a transfer in the early stages of the season.
No, but obviously you can take the first 4 and then you can move it on to your choice of the other 18 teams in terms of goalkeeper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Fabianski's getting a little bit more interest the closer we get to this, because there's a few things awkward. And I agree with you on the Luton West Ham thing. Is the more I've thought about it, I'm thinking, what's the chance of me actually going through the first 3 weekends and not deciding either A, I've made a monumental mistake somewhere and I need something else, and Jiggery wanting to jig something about, or B, no injuries, no suspensions. It might be just it falls into place and I go, okay, then I'm going to go there, because the awkwardness is, and there's obviously a marvellous enabler we're going to talk about at Luton in a bit, who's going to grow in popularity very, very quickly. I think even more so after this podcast, probably. But I can't help looking at it and thinking, well, I start with this player and I get the extra fixture because West Ham captaincy, but I've lost a fixture somewhere else. So it's almost like cancelling itself out. It's like the obsession. It's tunnel vision. I've got to have a captaincy for Luton West Ham. Fine, you've got a Luton player. You've got him twice. But you've also lost the fixture previously. It's just the same. It's no different to having a player who's got 4 games, who's got no captaincy across the first 4 match days. If you start with them, it's no different. So in that perspective, I've begun to think of it like you. Is it just a contingency and I drop into it?
Yeah,
that's which isn't right. That's never what we'd kind of say is like, oh, buy a player on a Friday night. We'd never do that. We'd go, go the week before. But in the Luton case, they've got Chelsea on the Friday night as well. So do I even want to drop into it earlier? And the first 2 Luton games are Brighton away and Chelsea away as well, which for Marvellous, by the way, the new 6.6 million Marvellous midfielder, the fixtures aren't relevant. And you should think about it. When you're looking for players from tackle tiers, the harder fixtures might even be better. Rather than the easier fixtures. So that doesn't matter. But say for Colton Morris, it's interesting because Colton Morris, when I first put a draft together, I put him in at 7.1 as forward. And as soon as Luton Burnley was postponed, I went, I ain't having him now. So why should I feel different about Nakamba now? It's interesting. Should we talk some enablers? So just we've kind of
we can do some enablers, and then we'll come back to the kind of the bigger watch list as well, and a few names on there that I wanted to maybe talk to you about as well, for sure.
Enablers. So I think in terms of forward and defence, there ain't great options. So even to the extent of, say, I did a bit of digging on passing and tackle numbers from the promoted teams yesterday, and it's something we've wanted to do. Like we identified João Paulinho really quickly from a promoted team last year, even though he'd obviously been overseas at Sporting Lisbon. So I looked into the detail of the promoted clubs, even things like Connor Roberts' passing numbers as a fullback for Burnley. Really surprising, very competitive against Josh Cullen in midfield, to the extent that actually Roberts actually averages more per 90.
Interesting.
But he is priced a little bit higher than those other Burnley defenders at 7.2. And at 7.2, you go, that's the enabler I want. Well, if Colwell's going to start for Chelsea, he's bloody 0.3 more.
Yeah. What's your, because I think it's important to maybe stick out there. What's your benchmark for enabler? Because I've always said 7 or less. Are you going a little higher?
I think if we use Colwell as a nice marker at 7.5, almost the bottom million,
everything below
maybe.
That. Okay. Yeah, fair play.
I think. And I certainly think, if people think, 7.7's an enabler, I think you can put those players into the category, but I've looked specifically at kind of under 7.5. And similarly, in the forward area, I still think it's like Morris at 7.1. Up to sort of Ferguson 7.8. I guess maybe more for a forward, that feels more still like an enabling price. But the problem is exactly what we discussed with Luke last week. The best players in the game are probably in the midfield area, and it's also where all the best enablers are.
Right.
So I've got a list of players that I want to cover off, kind of working backwards from underneath that 7.5 that I think are worth notable mention and people should keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks before the start. There is a standout, and we'll get to him. Arnat Danjuma, 7.4, has obviously joined Everton, which tiers unlikely and all that sort of thing. But certainly Antonio Conte viewed him very much as a centre forward. And
I was going to say, it comes across as if he's a midfielder, that's surely OOP a little.
If Dominic Calvert-Lewin isn't, I think would need Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be unavailable. But if he is unavailable, then I think
not if, James, when he becomes unavailable.
Yeah, okay. But for your game week 1 selection, if Calvert-Lewin's available, it's probably a no-go. But if he is, there's every chance he'll start up front. They've got good fixtures. I've got them best on my ticker for the first 8 match weeks, let's say. So I think 7.4 OOP could be quite interesting, but it needs Calvert-Lewin unavailable. 7.3 standout by distance for me is Yves Bissouma at Tottenham, who I looked at his numbers last season as well, and despite not playing much, he was averaging sort of around 59 per 90 for passes completed. So 60 is your tier 1 level. And bear in mind, Tottenham weren't a possession-based team, and they're now becoming one. We probably can expect that number to increase, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know when you spoke with Clayton yesterday, he was on your ones that you think might break through this season. And I wholly agree. And I think 7.3 is a decent price.
And he's capable to tackle tiers as well, Bissouma. So I mean, Bissouma's 7.3 is really, really interesting.
Do you remember from the top of your head what Højbjerg came in at last season?
Price wise,
Yeah,
to be honest, Højbjerg's always been a pretty decent
he's
asset in Sky.
8.1 this season, so he would have been similar last year, right?
That jump over Bissouma it rules him out completely.
Exactly. So,
and
but I suppose my point
also...
is more because I think Højbjerg was an okay Sky asset.
Yeah, fine.
But if Bissouma can replicate Højbjerg's numbers at 7.3, he's a great asset.
Exactly that. Højbjerg could go as well, by the way. So
yeah,
Bissouma's likely to be Tottenham starting 6 as it stands, and he drops in between the centre backs, goes and gets the ball, and he's got to go and win it back as well because we overload with attacking players. So Bissouma, I think, could be really interesting. Obviously, even more so if Kane goes, because it does offer you a bit of captaincy insurance then if you don't go with Son either. 7.2 is a couple interesting. So Fabinho looks like he's probably going to stay at Liverpool now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's pretty cheap. He doesn't
What happened? They spent all their money on Mbappe?
There was a story going around that apparently he couldn't take his dogs to Saudi Arabia because the breed's not allowed, but that's been poo-poo. It was completely rubbish. No, that was a legit story that people were speculating on. It looks like he's probably off. It might still happen, but if he's going to stay, the light in there, he's going to start. He's never been as good for tiers as you would expect. But it's interesting. We think about Trent and we go, the probability for him to increase in terms of passing tiers has really raised. So why isn't it for Fabinho as well? And actually, if you look towards the back end of the season, I realised their fixtures were better. The numbers were on the rise for Fabinho. So 7.2, I think he's getting completely overlooked at the moment. And I understand why it is, by the way. Anthony Elanga is a wild card pick in the sense he's just joined Nottingham Forest. And we know we potentially want some coverage for that second Friday night between Forest and Sheffield United. We'd probably want some clarity that he's going to start, and I think he would be one you just punt it quick and probably move on. You're not going to expect tears or anything like that off him, but an offensive wide player. And
yeah, I don't mind him being on the list, but the downside is that the single game days that I want the Forest player for, one's early in Sheffield United, the other one, well, Burnley, is quite a way away, and the gap to Gibbs White is 0.7. Like, it's such a small gap to give me the best player at Nottingham Forest as opposed to the enabler at Nottingham Forest. It's not like I've got to go from 7.3 that Bissouma is to Kane,
you might not be able to
example.
afford it, right?
Yeah, I would make a way for that one particularly. I would make a way, but I think the thing is, it is a bit of a wild card pick in the sense that he could explode. Like, he hasn't had minutes all of a sudden. If he starts getting minutes, he's one that I do think he could explode. You're right. I didn't know you were going to talk about Ndiaye. I didn't realize he was down as a midfielder.
Yeah. So when the game opened, I went, I want some of that. It was straight in for me. Then we thought it was going to Marseille. That's fallen through, and Marseille have now bought Ismaila Sarr as well, which is an alternative, different profile player, but an alternative that might be they're not coming back. He's been playing in the preseason for Sheffield United. So, I mean, he's more attractive than Elanga. So at the same price.
100%.
So, and they've got better fixtures across the first 4 if you do end up holding it a little bit longer. So I look at, that first game, they've got Palace at home, like I said, whereas Gibbs White goes to Arsenal. And I quite like that. And Dye's main man at Sheffield United. So I'm quite interested in that at 7.2. I think best 7.1 is probably Josh Brownhill, but I'm not overly keen on it. And as you already alluded to with Burnley, they've obviously got the Luton game's now missing, and the Forest game's on a Monday night in match week 5. Drop into it if you need to. At 7, Danilo at Forest is another alternative who chipped in with a few goals towards the end of the season.
He did, yeah.
And Oliver Norwood's tackle numbers aren't bad as well as Sheffield United. I mean, passing tiers are probably off the table in the Premier League, but that's another cheaper one where there's probably your baseline's possibly a little bit higher than Ndiaye. On Ndiaye, by the way, we'll talk about it in a sec, but tackle tiers are not impossible for him either, actually.
Right.
I think he'll get the odd one. 6.9 Christian Norgard.
That's why, because he presses on the centre-backs and wins the ball back. Okay. Yeah. Understandable.
Yeah, you can have that with certain teams. Like Richarlison used to be a tackle monster in this, didn't he? At Everton. Christian Norgard was a popular one for us in this a couple of years ago.
A couple of years back.
So you think about it, 2 years ago, we had Brentford come up, Norgard. Last year, we had Fulham come up, Paulinho. It's what part why we do this, looking at the promoted clubs. So Norgard 6.9. Looking at his data when he did play last year, those tackle numbers were on the decrease. Definitely. Yeah. But 6.9 is good price. Check the Corey at Palace. Tackle numbers not what you'd have expected last year, but he's been linked with a couple of clubs as well.
Yeah, I was going to say like that one is very dependent on whether or not even this Liverpool move or whoever or wherever he might end up might change his attractiveness in this game.
Now we're getting into the level that we really want to look into for the real cheapies. Billy Gilmore at Brighton is 6.8, which is cute and interesting because if he plays often enough, there's every chance the passes will be there, particularly in them early fixtures. But you've got the likes of Mahmoud Dahoud is, I think, almost certainly going to play, and Casado's still there at the moment.
Well, that's what I was going to say. First, I want before I was to buy Billy Gilmore, I would want Casado to be gone, so that frees up the spot there in the team. The other thing is like his comments, De Zerbi's comments about Casado leaving didn't make me feel like sometimes managers will be like, if he goes, he goes. We've got good cover in Billy Gilmore and whoever else. He was like, we would need to get another player. Is the kind of vibe I got from him, which then made me question, well, do you not fancy Billy Gilmore? But when he got some minutes towards the end of last season, he did get good reviews. I don't think he disappointed.
No, I think he did all right.
We commented like, we forgot he was there, didn't we? Like, and suddenly he popped up. So he's one that definitely two eyes are on. But I think a few pieces of the jigsaw would need to fall into place. And the other thing is Lewis Dunk's there. So do you want to double up on Brighton or not?
Yeah. Another one I noted is Scott McTominay, who obviously is a complete non-buy purchase at the moment as a Manchester United player. But should he move?
Unless, yeah, exactly.
Should he move? And your club's been linked quite a lot.
Yep, quite rightly.
I don't hate it. And it's interesting because obviously when he plays for Scotland, he really does chip in with the attacking returns, actually. So it might be subject to how he played. I think it would make him, even if he did sign for West Ham, say in the next couple of weeks, would make him a difficult one to start with. But I think is worth noting. Boubacar Kamara at Aston Villa, 6.7. Who started quite well in terms of tackle tiers, then got injured, came back, had another spell, looked good. Then he didn't look good again, but it is cheap enough that can be considered. I also like Christie at Bournemouth at 6.7. Their fixtures are rough. Marcus Tavernier got an injury for Bournemouth at Southampton last night, and I think there's every chance he'll start in the 10 position.
Right.
So that would be a complete. Are you capable of getting the offensive returns? A talented player. Nakamba is the standout 6.6 by a distance. And he's going to be very, very popular despite that missing game week 2 fixture. We'll come back onto him in a sec. Just to highlight a couple of 6.5s at the very bottom price. I've mentioned Kevin Sade to you before, who I think probably will start the season for Brentford, but there is that nagging doubt at the moment that when they go to a back three in certain games, he might be the one that then misses out. That's how it feels at the moment. Cole Palmer at Manchester City, who, how do we feel if we drop game week 1 and it's right, Palmer's starting on the right?
He fits into this category with the likes of Rico Lewis's of the world and what have you. I'm not for that. I think I feel like I want a little bit more certainty in my players.
But what if that certainty comes in the sense that he starts the Community Shield on the Sunday against Arsenal on the right, performs well, drops an attack in return, then he's in the team against Burnley on the Friday night, you see it again, that suddenly becomes tempting, surely.
Not to me. It's not my style. It's not even that I'm saying that he's a bad pick. It just all comes down to style, right? Take, for example, last year's winner, Paul McNulty. If you suggested something like a Palmer if he's in the team, I just feel like that would be like for him, that would be like, nah, that's completely against
6.5 attacking player playing regularly for Man City.
Well, you don't know he's playing regularly. He's played 2 games, so I just don't see that as the enough data to make that decision. I don't know. Paul, jump in the comments and tell us whether or not I'm right or wrong. I feel like when you
Oh,
got a
Paul's
slow
going
and
to tell you you're
steady.
right. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, of course. So everybody, I think my point is not even about whether he would or wouldn't. Everybody's style was different. I'm more of a plod along kind of guy, and players like Palmer, Rico Lewis, when you're like, oh, is this a chance? I bypass all of that. A club like City, where they've got so much depth there.
Pape Sarr, Tottenham, he's 6.5. And we mentioned him in January because it looked like a certainty he was suddenly going to get in the team. Didn't. He was very good in the first friendly. And as it stands, it's probably between him and Oliver Skipp, who plays as the right-sided 8 at the moment in Tottenham's team, subject to we could buy, and you should be conscious of that.
So are you saying that there's going to be a Bissouma plus one other as opposed to Bissouma, Højbjerg, and one other?
Bissouma behind.
Bissouma behind, and then Skipp or
Sarr or
Sarr,
Skipp and Maddison.
and then Maddison. And so Højbjerg's out of the picture in your mind at the moment.
I think Højbjerg would only be in the picture potentially as a 6 at the moment, which would mean Bissouma playing higher, which would make Bissouma less attractive. But I think more likely at the moment would be Bissouma at 6 and Skipp or Sarr at 8.
Okay.
And both of them played the position very well in the friendly against yourselves. Sarr won untold second balls. And I think both of them could be quite interesting from a tackle perspective, like genuinely. But you need assurance on it. I would play the extra for Bissouma as it stands. And Daniel Jebison of Sheffield United, he's another one who could cover that Friday night. He's classified incorrectly. It's forward. And it's not impossible that he starts as Sheffield United's forward. I don't think he will, but I think it's possible. And I think we should monitor that over the next couple of weeks. Because if suddenly you've got the 6.5 midfielder playing as number 9 in those first 2 weeks, with the captaincy on the Friday night, we should consider it. He's a young player.
Where was he before? Remind me. Why do I feel like
he scored?
Why do I feel like I've heard his name?
He scored when they went down. He scored a goal at Everton when he was only 17. He started.
Okay, maybe that's why.
So he's hitting 20 now. I think so. It's now about time to. Are you going to state a claim? Let's be honest. Sheffield United's alternative forwards are not great, right? Yeah. So there's a possibility there. But Nakamba is the standout. As I said, I did a bit of digging on data in terms of tackle tiers for the 3 promoted clubs. And I'll just take you through who's best from them, essentially. So tackles 1 per 90 comes out best at Burnley is Josh Brownhill, who's 7.1, 59 tackles 1 per 90, which is 59 tackles 1 per 90, James. Sorry, he's won 59 tackles across the season. Imagine 59 tackles 1 per 90. He won 59 tackles across the season. Okay. Oliver Norwood at Sheffield United, 77. It's a decent number now. Now, the theory, of course, as well, is when clubs get promoted, they're going to have less of the ball. So there's every chance of making even more tackles. It's, of course, harder to get the ball to counter that as well.
Yeah.
Now, best at Luton was Alan Campbell with 42, Amari Bell with 40, Marvellous Nakamba only 36. What's the catch?
Minutes.
Those 36 came in the equivalent of 15.8 matches, which makes him extremely good as a prospect, right? Son, you're going above 2 per game. It's 3 for tier 1, right? So for equivalent last year, I compared it with Paulinho, who was clear outstanding in the Premier League by a long way. 83 tackles 1 was way more than Idrissa Gana Gueye, who was second. To work it out as an equivalent per 90, Paulinho 2.41 tackles per game, Nakamba 2.28. It's close. Marvellous Nakamba is the outstanding enabler if you are looking for someone to pick up tacklers as it stands. Is he going to start regularly? Absolutely. It's not, I'm certain the Luton guys will tell you it's not in doubt from that perspective. And yet, my thought process is he's the one, but there's every chance I'm not going to start with him either, Suj, because my conclusion has been exactly what yours was.
Well, I'll worry about it in a few weeks, and he's the make weight. Because if say I've got Enzo Fernandez and Levi Colwill at the moment, I don't need 2 Chelsea players.
Got the same, by the way.
Yeah, but if Colwill's starting every game, and performing well, I'll sacrifice Enzo Fernandez, drop down, and something gives me the money to get from Gibbs White when I finish my need for him, or Mitoma's in my team right now, up to like 10s, 11s. An Arsenal midfielder comes in because I do like their fixtures, for example, or something. So, yeah, I'm going to wait on it. I don't like missing the game week 2 fixture. I don't like missing the game week 2 fixture. He's going to be my problem fixer as Nakamba, hopefully, if I need him by game week 4, the West Ham game. And the other interesting thing here is, though, we look at consistency. When you've got your enabler, you want consistency in minutes, and you want opportunity to get tiers, and tackle tiers we've established is the easiest one to identify. And quite often, attacking enablers don't exist, right? It's rare that you get enablers like a Ndai or Danjuma or what have you. There, the upside that you're looking for is attacking, not your bog standard tackle or pass tier. And I think it's uncommon to find an attacking enabler. We had some with Brighton last year, I think, if you put Mitoma in that bracket or whatever. March, maybe. And so I'm like, do I want to roll the dice and actually pick an attacking enabler rather than a defensive enabler? But the two that I mentioned there, Ndai and Danjuma, you're now talking about almost $1 million more, right? You're talking 0.6, 0.7 more. It's a lot of money. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we need to. But my draft that I mentioned earlier, James, has no enablers. Like the cheapest price player is Gibbs White. No, sorry, Colwell at 7.5, but then Gibbs White at 7.9.
Yeah. It's worth remembering as well, and we've mentioned this, it is small, but that Luton West Ham game can move.
Right.
It could move to the Sunday, 12 o'clock. An irony of ironies would be, should they draw Burnley in the Carabao Cup second round, which is the team that they were postponed to play against the weekend before, could move. Really, really could move. So imagine that. I think you'd be a bit gutted in that circumstance. And it is small. We're talking probably 5% chance, maybe tops, that it moves to the Sunday. But I think in that case, you'd probably be a bit gutted then if you start with him and it's no longer a single game day, and then know that that's an entry on that Sunday. And to give you the equivalent, I know what you're saying, Ndai 0.6 more, but you could then start Ndai 7.2. You've got the first 4, Crystal Palace at home, Forest away, captain, so effective 5, Man City at home, Everton at home, just 3 home games, plus an away captaincy, and he's their talisman, and drop it to Nakamba on the Sunday when Luton West Ham play each other.
Yeah.
And not that that's my plan, but the consciousness of knowing if it did move, that's 100% what I'd be considering, not necessarily 100% and die, but I'd be considering something like that. I'm like you, I'm thinking 4th weekend, I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to get an injury, and it's by Nakamba. That's my current thought process. And a contingency might be as well to start with, say, Flappy.
Right.
Because to be honest as well, I asked myself, if I got there and I captained one of those 2 players, I'd probably go Flappy. Because I know it's 7 points for the clean sheet versus an extra 3 points for the best case scenario of the tackles here. He's not going to drop in with many attacking returns, Nakamba. It won't be much of that. He won't. Paulinho didn't get many, but I bet he doesn't get as many attacking returns as Paulinho got last year. Would be much because Paulinho's big threat from set pieces, big unit. Nakamba won't be. So yeah, I'm thinking about potentially waiting it, even though I know he's. And now the alternative to that is to say, well, if you know he's the best, just get him in and leave it, right? Because it's not one you want to waste the transfer on. But
not with the fixture, missing fixture.
But then with him, I think my opinion would be, and everyone's more than welcome to disagree. My opinion right now is he's the best enabler on potential. And if you identify that, you think I just want to go with it and I want to leave it, because if the West Ham game, let's say the West Ham game wasn't a captaincy and the Burnley game was still existing and it was just a flat fixtures, I'd arguably be going with him.
Okay.
So I think it's a narrative that can be spun either way. But yeah, I'm thinking more about dropping to it, which there should be a consciousness about that. I'm leaning more and more into starting with 4-4-2. I think the best draft I can come up with is 4-5-1.
Agree with you.
But what I found with that was he's thinking about key rules of the game and always remembering, can you get to every player in one transfer? And I'd look at it and go, I cannot get Mo Salah.
I'm the same. My thought process, I was going to ask you a question about formation, which you've preempted. I think the best formation will be 4-5-1, but for game week 1, I'm going to be 4-4-2. It's why I've got Jesus in there. I'm set up as a 4-4-2, and I'm going to work within that restraint. And there's going to be a lot of midfielders that are going to tempt me that I'm going to be frustrated by. The Levi Colwill kind of inklings that he's going to start really helps with that, because he's my fourth defender there, alongside Saliba, Dunk and Trent. So yeah, if Levi Colwill wasn't available, for example, and I've only got 7.5 to replace him with a defender, I'm not 100% sure I'd know where I'd go,
No Manchester City defensive, Suj?
I haven't got any, but I can't afford it. Are you going to try and then tell me one, Rico Lewis?
No, not at all.
Sergio Gomez.
Who's your keeper, did you say?
Alisson.
I mean, Ramsdale for Arsenal coverage, save a bit of money, and then Saliba up the Stones or Diaz.
Yeah, and that might be the case, but at the moment, I'm comfortable as I am.
Rodri in?
So, I wish.
He's in mine at the moment.
Yeah, I wish. I might get a framed photo of him. We've got a framed photo of our friend Leroy Sané in the office. I might have to replace that photo in the frame, James, with Rodri.
So would he fall under the line of sort of player you want the most, or you think you're going to go without?
Yeah, I do think so. The thing with Rodri last year that was the cherry on the icing on the cake, I would say, James, was the attacking returns. Like the tackle tiers, the pass tiers was the cake. The icing was quite often the tackle tier. And then he chipped in with quite a few attacking returns that were unexpected, that made them really kind of an elite player. And also the lack of ownership made it even more satisfying. Do you think the attacking returns could 12% continue?
Of teams, so
yeah, which is low, right?
Yeah, he's going to chip in with a couple.
Yeah,
I mean, so, Rodri will get more attacking returns than Nakamba. Bad comparison, but yeah. Rodri will get 4 or 5 a season or something, and there'll be the odd assist thrown in that as well.
Yeah, which makes him really a great asset. So, but then the thing is, I'll get there in the end. I think it's just a case of manoeuvring the first few weeks, seeing what the lay of the land is with certain players, who's getting minutes, who's not. Let the transfer window close so we know that the squads are locked in. By well before Christmas, I'll get to Rodri. But I just don't see myself at the moment starting with him.
Well, before Christmas. Is that once you've forced the camera in, you've got that little bit more?
I've got money burning a hole in my pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Who's your other forward out of interest at the moment?
Jesus.
I consider Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, and
that's going to give you a little bit of money as well.
The kind of Kamara shout that you mentioned as an enabler, I do like.
I'm not that keen on him actually.
Sorry, where I was going with that was if I needed Villa coverage for captaincy, for example, then it makes him way more attractive. The thing with Ollie Watkins there that you said that actually makes him unattractive is the lack of need for captaincy coverage with him.
So second Sunday, I presume at the moment you're going no West Ham, is that right?
Yeah, as it stands,
no Villa.
No Villa.
And presumably, unless Danjuma really shows himself, no Everton, I'm going to guess as well,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you're going to captain a Chelsea player on Sunday the 20th away to West Ham.
I certainly am.
Which is presumably going to be Colwill, or if we're
Fernandes.
comfortable with it, or Enzo Fernandez. And that's fine. That's perfectly reasonable, I agree. Watkins at home to Everton.
Looks tasty, doesn't it?
Consider this as, if you got there, do you think you go Watkins or Fernandez?
Watkins. I'd
Agreed.
rather go Watkins.
This is the conclusion I'm coming to on that as well. And therefore, if you think about that, chance you captain Jesus?
Slim.
Well, mind you, the Monday night against Palace, but would you captain Jesus over Saliba on that Monday?
I don't think I would,
Exactly.
I don't think I would.
Close.
But Arsenal now have a bit of depth there at centre back. So You'd think that Saliba and Gabriel were so good as a partnership. Why would they need to be broken up to get Timber in or whatever? But if Timber was going to play at right back, then what do they do with Ben White? Because he is a capable centre back. So I think they've got a bit of depth there.
Yeah.
I don't see Saliba being dropped, but there is depth there. Here's a question for you then, James. Mitoma plus Enzo Fernandez versus Rodri plus Nakamba over the first 4 or 5, because it's 0.4 difference. Like, I could take out Mitoma and Fernandez.
The Fernandez option, because there's one, arguably 2 captaincies there.
Well, Colwell's sitting there.
Yeah, sure. But I think we would all like to go with him at the moment, but we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know at this moment at the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us probably doing dangerous fit. I said a couple of weeks ago, do your draft from sort of at least Badia Shield. Obviously, as soon as we recorded the Sky Pod last week, literally finished. I messaged Luke 5 minutes after we finished recording, went, Fofana's done his ACL. Bless him. So unlucky. They might add, but they're not really being linked with centre-backs. They're more being linked with selling Trevor Chalobah at the moment, which would just leave Silva, Badia Shield.
I heard we were interested in Chalobah. But I think quite a few clubs will be.
Yeah, he's decent. I don't think he's Chelsea level, but he's decent centre-back. So it probably is the Fernandez-Mitoma route, probably. And yes, these combinations are very important. I mean, I'll give you a really dirty one as an example, Suj. Trent and Saka, 20.4 million, right? Or Salah plus someone in the 9 million bracket.
I am going to go with Trent.
It's 8 million Saka. Bracket, isn't it? So you could do that. You could go Salah and Mitoma as an example. Salah and Mitoma is nearly the same, isn't it?
I would go Trent and Saka. I think Arsenal are going to be a real attacking threat in the first few weeks. And I think Trent has now added such a wide variety of point scoring opportunity with this inversion. If it continues to happen, passes, assists, goal, like the lot. The one has always been weakest for Trent will probably be tackle tier. But
I remember the example
I would go now. Trent and Saka over.
So the example I'm going to give was Salah and Saliba, or Trent and Saka.
I would go with Trent and Saka for me. I think Trent's gonna score as many points as Salah will this season.
Yeah, I mean the answer.
And I think Saka's
the answer might just be the 2 Arsenal players. By the way,
I think Saka's gonna outscore Saliba this season as well.
Yeah, but it's justified with that price, isn't it?
Yeah,
the price is.
There is a differential.
I feel the more I dig into the game, pricing is really good this year, and I think they deserve quite a bit of credit for that. Actually,
yeah.
Yes, we'd all price Haaland higher, but yeah, generally it's tough. It's tough because I think exactly what I asked for at the end of last season. We've got to be in a position where there's players who want rather than need, who look at and go, I've got to leave it. And if I look now and I think, as it stands, there's every chance I'd be going out without the likes of Salah, Saka, Son, Foden, Kane.
I don't have any of the players you've mentioned.
These are heavy hitting players who could all do great.
Yeah. And I think Manchester United will do quite well this season as well, but Rashford's just the standout there. But Bruno Fernandes, what's he priced in at? I didn't even look.
He's not much cheaper than Rashford. It's not really a debate for me, I don't think.
No, not between the two. But if you just took Bruno Fernandes as a standalone, Bruno Fernandes, is he worth 10.7 million?
I think more interesting ones for United, if you wanted to save against Rashford and look at alternatives, would be Casemiro's 8.1. I think it's good. Again, to be honest, in and around that sort of just under Enzo valuation. And Anna in goal 7.3. Likes of Luke Shaw defensively, possibly. But I just think that's so clear, that Manchester United captaincy on one, that for me, 3 non-negotiable players right now, if they're fit, is Haaland, Duncan, Rashford. Everything else is still a little bit up for grabs, I think.
I think an Arsenal defensive is also there. For me, Trent still is in there. Depending on your need for your captaincy coverage, like Gibbs White or what have you. There's a few that are not specific players, but from clubs. But yeah, is there anyone else on your watch list, James, that's there that you are looking at that you are upset that you don't have? Like any Brentford coverage that
No,
you're
I mean,
unhappy about?
I haven't got Mbumo on mine. There's probably another one like Mitoma. People go, and I know Mbumo is an absolute shoo-in for a lot of people. Um, I just don't need it. And there's other players I want more. I got Mbumo and Fernandez at the same price, near enough. I want Fernandez, as in Enzo Fernandez, obviously. So not massively keen. Few others to shout out. Kovacic 8.3, I think could be interesting. 1 million saving versus Rodri. If he was to get near the passing numbers, you have to consider it. Paquetá's numbers, by the way, such 8 million. I know he's more than Ben Rama, but his tackle numbers were really increasing towards the end of last season as
well. So we've spoken about how for Brazil at the World Cup he played alongside Casemiro in a 2, whereas at West Ham he plays further forward in front of Rice and Souček as a 10, let's say. If strategically, tactically, he drops into Rice's position as one of the 2, and Ben Rama plays further forward or something else, then 100%, all day long. If he continues to play higher up, he's still a good asset. Maybe less appealing. I noticed yesterday on your podcast with Clayton, in terms of players who were average or so last season that might break through this season, none of my boys got a mention. But I think you did say Paqueta had a good end to the season, but I think he will kick on. I think again, in the minutes that he played, did really well.
I didn't include him because I thought it was really unfortunate because he missed the whole of the first half.
Yeah,
right?
He kicked on. He will. I think kick on next season as well. And the wild card one there is if he stays and becomes first choice, Skamaka could kick on in season 2. I'd like to see all 3 of them really kick on.
Going to do a couple of questions before we finish?
Yeah, I think we should. Let me pull them up. And while I do you want to tell the listeners what they have to look forward to for the rest of the week? I need to remember, is it still called twitter.com? What do I type into the internet browser these days?
Yeah, you'll find it.
All right.
The Bird app. Type in the Bird app, formerly known as Twitter, and see how you get on. There's no Sky Fantasy. That's
one for the
please. YouTube. No. Suj did the West Ham crossover.
No, it was the Twitter X. It was the Twitter X. James.
Yeah, go on then. Show me the difference between the Twitter X and the West Ham crossover.
The Twitter X has got a couple of additional bits, James.
No Sky Fantasy Football podcast next week, guys, because it's correspondent week, which is primarily FPL focused, but we will discuss pretty much with all 20 correspondents, predicted lineups.
Plenty of them play. Like
yeah, you will find it very, very interesting. And I'm sure a couple of the guys who play Sky will reference Sky on certain occasions. There's 20 podcasts between Monday and Saturday next week, one focus on each club. We will have another Sky Fantasy Football podcast in the days before the season starts on Wednesday, is it 9th of August, I want to say, maybe. So yes, that sounds right. Rest of this week, Clayton rejoins me for the transfer window show tomorrow, and we've got a Gaffer preview if you're interested in playing that on Friday with the guys from the EFL Fantasy podcast. That's the championship fantasy based game. That's a one-off preview with the guys from the EFL Fantasy pod. And if you want to support the show, www.patreon.com/Planet FPL, where Suj is about to tell you, you'll get access to our Slack community from the £5 tier and above. And that includes access to James's incredible spreadsheet planner that I just can't do without.
The Skittles spreadsheet, which shows the gaps between fixtures, and the relevance and the importance of it is quite clear. A couple of questions that we've had in on Twitter, one in particular that James's spreadsheet really helps with. Not that though, there's so many good Sky managers in there, and like you said at the start of the season, at the start of the show, sorry, I'm way more looking forward to Sky than FPL for sure, and those guys, within there are all very knowledgeable and do well. So it's a good place to make some Sky Fantasy Football friends if you want to come and be a part of it.
An interesting point. I feel like with FPL, it will be difficult to make huge mistakes. I feel like with Sky, this needs more thought. There's more players who I want, who I can't get. And therefore, there's more danger of
being hurt.
Yeah, I think so. Like at FPL, I just feel like at the moment you can go in I could spend 3 weeks thinking about it, or I could go in and spending 10 minutes thinking about it, and there probably won't be a huge difference in the result.
Yeah, you know what? This is you're right. The way it felt to me, the way I would describe that thought process was boring. So I wanted to. I'd be interested to know, and I asked the universe on X, what would happen if you didn't pick Haaland
in this?
Listen, no, in FPL. And I'm going to continue to call it X because I'm on Elon Musk's payroll, mate.
So are you considering not going with Haaland in FPL?
But why? So ask yourself why. Because
Answer
I want to make
question,
it.
Bitch.
Because I want to make it. Because I feel like I want to make it interesting. Like you said, right? It's hard to make mistakes. I want to make it interesting for myself. The whole point is to have fun. You did a really interesting podcast with James Wilson on Patreon about mental health and all of that kind of thing. Like, I want to make it interesting, and I was just a thought experiment in what could I do to make the game interesting. Our friend Paul, Sky player in FPL, a few seasons ago, if you remember, he played FPL with Sky rules to make it more interesting for himself, and he's
top 50
exactly
in the world in FPL.
Yes. And so it was a thought experiment in how do I make it more interesting, because it comes back to what you said. Yeah, it's hard to make mistakes. It's going to get a bit boring and samey. Let's have your own fun with it, play it your own way. But whereas here, I don't feel that. I don't feel that need to spice up the game with anything. I think it's spicy enough.
It's tough enough as it is.
It's spicy enough. Yeah, exactly that. Let's look at these questions, Jade, before this becomes a 3-hour podcast. Well, it's not that long. Sai says he's only played Sky for the World Cup and the Euros. And aside from captains each day, what's considered a template transfer strategy? Excuse me. He's aware of the 3-for-1s. Do these typically account for most transfers during the season? Well, that's how you use them aggressively. I think there are a few basic rules,
it's more
like
chaining moves.
Don't go in on a first day of a match day.
Exactly that. As we say that we might do that with Nakamba. But,
but it will be fixing a problem more than likely,
it's
right?
That, certain principles of ideas. So, try and stay that you can get to any player within the game in one transfer rather than two. Generally, don't ever buy a player on the first day of a weekend, whether that's the Friday or the Saturday of a given weekend. You're not gaining anything. Can you wait a week and buy that player on a Sunday and then not lose a fixture, for example, and gain an extra one? So the 3-for-1s has been a kind of a long, it's not so much of a thing now, in the sense of, I'm going to go Salah for 3 games, miss that one Haaland game, go Haaland for 3 games, miss that one Salah game. Like, if we had chains of that right throughout the season, then sure, great. But if you take Liverpool as an example, which I've just used, they're obviously going to have a lot of Sunday games because they're in the Europa League, right? So how often are you going to get to jump it and go back? Not often necessarily. So it's more about chaining the moves and go, right, I'm going him 3 games over the person I'm selling's got 1 game, and then he's only got 1 game, and I'm going to chain it to the next person who's got 3 games. So it's more like, right, I'm going Haaland over Salah because he's got 3 over Salah's 1. Then I'm going Bukayo Saka because he's got 5 fixtures now over Haaland's 2 over this period, and you're just jumping it. He's more the thing rather than the back and forth. I don't think you see as much now. It doesn't feel like. Obviously, you can do it, but it's more about just maximizing your potential on fixtures and capability, which obviously surrounds about captaincy as well, and keeping in mind, obviously, if you captain a player, you've effectively got him twice.
Mitch is looking to cover off every game before the internationals without using a transfer, and then says, so am I missing any obvious opportunities? Well, I think we just answered that, right? Yes, but regardless, there's always going to be missed opportunities in the first few weeks because we can't have everybody and there's so many good options. So you're not going to be able to cover off every game before the internationals without missing any opportunities.
Of course you can.
No, you can do it, but you will miss opportunities.
But you can cover everything. So it's,
you can cover everything, but I think he's trying to cover everything and then not miss anybody going off big or anything like that. It's inevitable you're going to, right?
Well, yeah. It's like, any of us who choose not to go with Mo Salah, he's not choosing Mo Salah because we think he's shit or he's not going to return. Like, we know what's going to happen. It's just, I hope it's not too bad. So, but in terms of covering that first before the international break, you want a City player, you want a United player, you want an Arsenal player, you want a Chelsea player, You want a West Ham or a Luton player. You want a Nottingham Forest or a Sheffield United player. And you want Lewis Dunk.
Correct.
And that all, in some way, will cover you off, bar maybe the last Sunday. Oh, I said Arsenal player, didn't I? So, yeah, that'll do it. And that's 6 or 7 players. And that'll be the makeup of your team. There's no point picking a team and go, here's my favorite players. Like, I want Heung-min Son as an example. I'm never going to captain Heung-min Son, for example. When there's someone else sitting there at similar equivalent, you go, I'm going to captain him twice. Like, that matters. So the fixtures obviously have a major bearing in terms of what you want to do at the start of the season. I think that's probably the right period to consider. When we looked at single game days a couple of weeks ago, I said, I don't think there's much point looking beyond Luton West Ham at this stage.
Agreed. Rob H doesn't want to make too many goalkeeper changes. Who's the best goalkeeping option? I mean, that's a bit of a tricky one because of the rest of the makeup of your team, because the easy answer is Alisson.
Yeah, probably he's the highest price, and that's correct, I think.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the ones that are on your list, James, are the ones that I'd look at, which is Ramsdale and Onana, Fabianski or Flecken, the cheaper options that are decent. He also asked who the best Sheffield United option is. I mean, it's Ilman and Dye, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Max FPL wants to know if TAA is a need.
No.
Yeah, I agree with you, but
no,
he's very much at the top of the want, so he's as close to need as possibly can be for me. I'm really betting on TAA being good. Like what happened to me at the back end of last season maybe has subconsciously scarred me, where I went a week early and got VVD, and had I waited a week, I would have ended up with Trent instead of VVD, and Trent went on a tear after that, didn't he?
Yeah, no, it's not. He's not a need. I mean, look, if you go without no Liverpool, you've got to make a decision about what you're doing on Sunday the 13th. I don't like looking at my team on that first Sunday and think, I'm captaining Enzo Fernandez. Doesn't feel great to me on that first weekend. That said, what am I overly expected of Trent away to Chelsea? I realised those games finished 0-0 last year, but am I necessarily expecting that again opening weekend? No, probably not. And the following Saturday, as I said, do I captain Trent home to Bournemouth rather than Haaland at home to Newcastle? I just think in this format, almost any Haaland game at the Etihad is a... I mean, you could make a case that Haaland's just a non-negotiable for any fixture. You could definitely make that case in this particular format, because you can still make the gains on... It's not like in FPL where you've got 38 captaincy choices and you think, I want to bet against at some point. Like, you could captain Haaland every time Manchester City play, and you've still got, 2 or 3 other captaincy opportunities every weekend. So what's that? Probably 100 on, I guess, a rough estimate, 100 different alternatives or so for captaincy to make those gains. So, yeah, I mean, you could make that case, just go, I don't care. Like, even in match week 8, he goes to Arsenal, I'm going to captain him. And that might be the case. You need something else fixtures-wise. If Kane's going to Luton and is still at Tottenham and Haaland's going to Arsenal, then I probably do want to captain Kane as on that example, but it wouldn't be often you'd feel like that.
And FF Thinker, how many midfield plodders is too many? The likes of Bissouma or Rice or Enzo. He says, I'm thinking 3 with 2 explosive options, Saka, Rashford, Bruno. Well, that means 5 in total. So I'm working with the assumption that I only want 4 midfielders to start with. And so it's how many out of my 4 as opposed to how many out of my 5. And I think 1 is okay. But although if Enzo Fernandez is in that bracket, then maybe 2. Let's say 1 from a premium team and 1 from a relegation threatened team. That's what I'd say.
You absolutely could put this would sound ridiculous to new players, but you absolutely could put a midfield together like Rodri, Enzo Fernandez, Casemiro, Bissouma, and Nakamba and do quite well. But you need that explosiveness. So if you're going to go down that route, for example, I would absolutely want Haaland probably plus Kane if he was going to stay, and really top of the... So Trent would have to go in defensively, Ruben Diaz or John Stones. You'd go right at the top at the other ends of that, or go just Haaland and go with a really strong back 4. I don't think you want that sort of 5.
No.
It's one of the things I think people are conscious of. We discussed this with Luke. It's like you could pick 4 good players here, or 3 good players. You pick Rashford, and it's like, oh shit, there's only one space left. subconsciously, I think having someone like Ndai, because he's offensive rather than a tier hauler, if you will, might make you feel a little bit better about things. Because there are a few drafts I've looked at and I thought, boring that. And boring can win this game, by the way.
£50,000 ain't boring, James.
No, exactly. But you do. The thing is with Fernandez and Rodriguez, they'll tick over great. It's the fives, the sevens, etc., etc. But it's hitting that one when Benrahma goes to Luton on the Friday night and gets 2 goals and an assist. He's worth how many games of a Rodri? It's big, isn't it? And that you've got, you're probably never going to captain Rodri, and that sort of thing has to come into your thinking as well.
Cool, James. That's a wrap on the Twitter questions. We've done the old sales pitch on Patreon, but you know where to head. Do leave us a review or a thumbs up or a like or anything else, and we'll be back at you in 2 weeks, where we'll literally be days away from deadline. We do have a slightly later deadline for Sky than FPL. And I think we'll be pretty much as close to locked in as we possibly can be by then. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Look after yourselves. Stay safe. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Play it your way. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.